They bowed, not in worship, not in surrender. 20 biomechanical warriors forged from alloy and precision stood in 2 perfect rows beneath the shattered vaults of their own making. Steam curled around their feet. Blue photonic eyes glowed steadily in the smoke-choked air, and every single one of them bowed, not to a god, not to their supreme castellan, but to the lone human standing in the ruins. His cape was torn. His uniform was scorched and off-color from soot. He limped slightly, not from weakness, from memory. They had once called him soft. He had bled where they could not, broken where they would have failed. And still he stood. This is not the story of conquest. It is the story of grit, of the day perfection met failure and called it teacher. But it didn't begin here. Not with silence and reverence. It began 3 cycles earlier on a day so clean it smelled like arrogance, back when the great halls still gleamed, back when they still believed they were untouchable, back when they thought he was the one who needed fixing. Part 1. The Arrival. The city of Xir'Thal hung like a crown over the water, anchored to pillars that pierced the ocean crust. Every surface shimmered. Silver ridges, latticed towers, symmetrical walkways polished by micro-drones to a shine that hurt to look at. It was perfect, and Harrow hated it. The shuttle hissed as it docked. Atmospheric pressure equalized with a sharp snap. The doors peeled back to reveal a welcome party. 3 Xir'Thal officers and a drone relay, waiting in silent formation. Harrow stepped out, boots scuffed, joints sore. Bag slung over one shoulder like he was showing up late for deployment drills. His expression said he didn't care much about the ceremony. One of the officers stepped forward, broad-shouldered, face unmoving, eyes lit from within. "I am Castellan Irix," it said, "Human Harrow, Resilience Advisor." "That's me," Harrow replied, "though I was hoping for consultant. Sounds less like an insult." Irix ignored the jab. "Your assignment parameters have been reviewed. Your purpose is to evaluate and supplement recovery readiness across our command echelon." "In plain language?" "You are here to explain why you do not fail as expected." Harrow's eyebrows rose. "Great, so we're starting with flattery." The drone whirred, scanning his vitals. Harrow swatted at it absently. As they walked through the inner hall, Harrow took it all in. The geometry was flawless. The lighting was natural, filtered through a hex of bioluminescent membranes. Everything breathed logic, symmetry, and control. Everything felt sterile. No grit, no scrape, no memory of pain. They arrived at the central platform. A ring of combat engineers, diagnostics analysts, and armored units observed him from a distance, their stances rigid, not hostile, just curious, like watching a fragile artifact move under its own power. "Where's the training zone?" Harrow asked. "You may designate any unused corridor." "That's cute," Harrow muttered, dropping his bag. "You think I'm here to watch your drills and file a report. I'm not." He turned, facing them all now. His voice rose slightly. "You invited a human to teach you about resilience. That doesn't mean lectures. That means pain, sweat, mistakes. I'm not here to tell you what we do when things go wrong." He pulled a rolled cloth from his pack and unwrapped it. Dented tools, burned wraps, a torn ration bar, still half edible. "I'm here to show you how we live there." None of them moved. Their eyes didn't blink. He smiled anyway. "Don't worry, you'll hate it." Part 2. The Quake. They didn't believe in failure. The Xir'Thal had purged that concept long ago, the way humans might purge a virus. In their society, perfection wasn't just ideal. It was infrastructure. Every building recalibrated itself daily. Every warrior moved with practiced efficiency. And every system, Every code, every protocol was engineered to anticipate catastrophe and erase it before it began. So when the tremors started, they didn't run. They analyzed. Harrow felt it first, a subtle shift beneath his boots, like the world had suddenly taken a breath but didn't know how to exhale. "You feel that?" he asked the nearby engineer. The Xir'Thal unit barely looked up. "Seismic stability remains within acceptable thresholds." "Yeah," Harrow muttered, "until it doesn't." Then it hit, not a tremor, a fold. Reality buckled, the ground lifted, cracked, and twisted sideways like a snapped bone. The central column supporting Thalvor's Hall of Function shuddered, then collapsed in on itself. Screams, not human, metallic, modulated like a chorus of dying engines. 1 second the corridor was straight, the next it was on fire. Harrow didn't wait for orders. He didn't run diagnostics. He moved. A support beam had sheared through the wall, pinning one of the warriors by the midsection. Sparks danced across exposed circuits. The warrior's hands twitched, trying to input a command it no longer had the strength to process. "Hold on," Harrow said, already pulling off his jacket. "You're not done yet." He wrapped his arms around the glowing hot metal. Skin burned. He screamed through his teeth, lifted, shifted. The beam groaned, rose 1/2 inch. Enough. The warrior rolled free. 1 down. Harrow coughed up smoke and stumbled toward the next collapse. 2 engineers were trapped under a ceiling panel. Their exo-limbs had locked. Systems frozen. Too much damage for auto repair. Harrow found a pry bar, wedged it in, leveraged his full body weight. Muscles screamed. The bar snapped. He used a ventilation pipe instead. "Why are you doing this?" one of the warriors asked, sparks arcing from his joints. Harrow didn't stop working. "Because I'm here, and so are you. That's all the reason I need." By the time the emergency failsafes re-engaged, Harrow had dragged 4 more to safety. He collapsed against a half-melted wall, coughing blood and ash. Around him, perfect machines lay broken but alive. They stared at him like he was something ancient, something terrifying, something real. Later, in the recovery wing, Castellan Irix stood at the edge of Harrow's medpod. "You acted without authority, without logic. You damaged yourself severely." Harrow, his voice shredded, rasped, "You're welcome." "I do not understand how you function." "Neither do I," he whispered, "but it works." Irix paused. "We failed to anticipate. You did not." Harrow's eyes opened, bloodshot and blazing. "That's because you planned for stability. I trained for collapse." Part 3. The Aftershock. The rebuilding began in silence. No announcements, no ceremony. The Xir'Thal were efficient, even in failure. Units reassembled the collapsed corridors with precision. Structural drones mapped damage. Atmospheric processors vented the smoke. Light returned to the city's veins. But something had changed. And it wasn't the walls. It was the way they looked at Harrow. He noticed it the second he returned to the platform. His burns were treated. His ribs were taped tight. He moved slower, but not from weakness, just honesty. Pain didn't scare him. Ignoring it did. As he dropped his duffel onto the scorched floor of the old training bay, 6 warriors stood nearby, watching, not evaluating, waiting. "You're early," he muttered. None spoke. Harrow stretched carefully. His left side still screamed when he reached too far. "Well," he said, rolling his shoulders, "let's see how much braking you learned." They began again. No more pristine drills, no choreographed motions. Harrow set up chaos runs, uneven weights, flickering lights, random alarms blaring mid-exercise. At first, they stumbled. Then they adapted. Lovarek, the youngest of the 6, was the first to fall during the crawl circuit. He'd hooked a limb on the beam and dropped face first into a patch of shattered alloy. The others paused. Harrow didn't. He walked over, crouched, and offered a hand. Lovarek stared at it, confused. "What is the point," he asked, "of repeating motions that are inefficient and painful?" "Because the day will come when you can't predict what happens next. You won't get perfect ground. You'll get a collapse and a 10-second window. These drills don't make you strong. They make you fail here so you can succeed there." He pointed upward, toward the fractured spire. Lovarek took his hand and rose. Word spread, not as gossip, not as a command. The concept took hold like a virus, not one to purge, but to understand. Grit. They couldn't translate it cleanly. Their lexicons rejected it. But the shape of it, the texture of failure embraced and repurposed, that they could feel. Soon more arrived. Engineers, infantry, analysts, not to watch, to fall, to rise. Harrow stood back more often now. He corrected the form, slowed breathing, applied tape and ice, gave no lectures, only presence. One evening, Castellan Irix returned. His gait was unchanged, but something in his posture had shifted. He watched the drills in silence. "You've created dissonance," he said. Harrow didn't look up from wrapping Lovarek's arm. "Growth hurts." "It is not logical." "No," Harrow said. "It's necessary." Irix stepped forward. "The high triad is uncertain. They request data, a model, metrics." "You want metrics?" Harrow stood. "Fine." He pointed to the group. "They used to wait for orders. Now they move before the ceiling falls." He tapped his own chest. "I should be dead. Your logic said I would be." Then he leaned in, voice low and razor-edged. "But your survivors are alive because someone decided to act without certainty." Part 4. The Shift. The storm came without warning. Not geological this time. Not a quake or collapse. It was orbital. A shock wave from the dying edge of a rogue sun, years overdue, slamming into Thalvor's atmosphere like a hammer from the gods. Shielding held, mostly, but the eastern power grid failed. One of the energy spires overloaded. Fire rolled through Sector 9, and 2 transport towers lost artificial gravity mid-climb. 300 civilians. 10 seconds. No time to call for help. Harrow wasn't there. He was in the lower wing, unconscious, recovering from a pulmonary bleed brought on by overexertion and training in low-oxygen chambers. His orders? Full rest, no movement, no stress. For once, he obeyed. The Xir'Thal didn't wait. Lovarek moved first. He was on a maintenance catwalk when the emergency alarms fired. Old instincts, the kind burned into him by drills that made no sense until they did, flared hot. He didn't wait for orders. He triggered the lockdown bypass, grabbed a brace kit from a storage vault, and leapt 3 meters onto the external ladder of the east tower. "Reinforce Junction 30, he said over internal comms. "Evacuation path will fail in 20 seconds if unsupported." Another voice, Kalen, second-generation engineer, answered without hesitation. "Copy. Initiating manual override. I will fail. I will correct. I will persist." It was the doctrine, not chanted, not scripted, lived. 5 more joined, not as a squad. As a reaction, Lovarek reached the grav stabilizer just as the tower's upper floors began tilting. He drove the anchors into the frame manually, welding one with a plasma torch and the other with his own body braced against the load. His arms trembled, his breath quickened. Pain, real, tangible, and accepted. Below him, a civilian transport descended lopsidedly. The pilot's voice shook through the channel. "Guidance failure. Stabilizers off axis." Lovarek grunted into his mic. Don't need access. Just land. We'll catch you. And they did. Two Xir'Thal, built for logic, stood beneath a falling transport with nothing but reinforced shield poles and raw momentum. They locked arms, braced, and absorbed the drop. The ship hit hard. Metal screamed, but it didn't break, and neither did they. By the time Harrow woke, the reports had already cycled. 0 fatalities, 47 critical injuries, all stabilized within minutes. No panic, only action. He sat upright, tearing off the medlink. Irix stood at the edge of the room, holding a data slate. For once, no guard, no escort, just a quiet awe behind those glowing eyes. "You weren't there," Irix said, "and they still moved." Harrow blinked. Did they wait for simulations, approval, a probability threshold? Number, they acted. Harrow smiled weakly, chest tight. Then it's not mine anymore. Irix stepped closer. The doctrine. Theirs now. Part 5. The bow. They bowed. Not in worship, not in surrender. 20 Xir'Thal warriors stood aligned in 2 perfect rows beneath the broken vaults of what was once the Hall of Judgment. The structure had not been rebuilt. They had chosen to leave it ruined. The fractures were deliberate now, a reminder. Steam curled around their feet. Their armor gleamed, not from polish but from use. Their blue-lit eyes dimmed respectfully as the human approached, step by step, through ash and memory. Harrow walked slowly, not for effect, because his body still remembered pain. The cape trailing behind him was the same one he had arrived in. Torn, burned, unwashed. No metals, no colors, just white stained with effort. At the center of the hall stood Castellan Irix, no longer flanked by escorts, no longer apart from the doctrine. He stood equal, scarred, quiet, and waiting. Harrow stopped 3 steps away. They looked at one another for a long time, not as enemies, not as commander and subordinate, as witnesses. Then Irix spoke, not aloud, but broadcast, one phrase sent to every frequency the Xir'Thal used. He did not teach us to be perfect. He taught us to survive imperfection. The warriors bowed as one, not to strength, not to leadership, to a lesson, to grit. Harrow said nothing. He didn't need to. But as he looked around at the cracks they chose to keep, at the scars they now wore openly, at Lovarek in the back row with a bandage wrapped around his knee like a badge, he smiled, just a little, and whispered, mostly to himself, "Guess I wasn't wasting my time after all." In the weeks that followed, the Xir'Thal established the doctrine of variable response, part training, part mindset, part cultural shift. They still prized logic, still built with symmetry, but now they trained for chaos. Now they practiced recovery. Now they honored scars. Harrow never took command. He didn't need to. The species he had once fought now sent envoys to learn under his students. They had become something else, not human, but more complete. One day, long after his bones had begun to ache for real, Harrow found a small monument in the corner of the ruined hall. Not a statue of him, not a quote, just a replica of his old pry bar, the one that had snapped during the quake. Beneath it, one word engraved in alien script: persist.